And fair to say that Sarah's with JBG. Gotcha. Okay. We're all ready. Then please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence.
We've had 17 police officers and 4 firefighters lost to the line of duty since our last meeting.
Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, well, it is a budget workshop, kind of a start to our meeting, 4 o'clock. And with us via media is Taylor from Legal, representing Legal, and Sarah from JBG. They'll be joining us via the Zoom meeting. So with that said, Chief Troutwine, would you like to open this up?
I sure would. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Board. Good evening. And Sarah will be doing the presentation for Gabe. And before she gets in that, I do have some introductory comments I'd like to say. So with the hope that it starts to frame some things as we move forward in our budget workshops and as we move forward in the budget process. So as we reviewed last month in our budget workshop, there's a handful of strategies that staff is continuing to focus on, providing a budget accurate to the district's needs, being as efficient and effective as possible from a fiduciary standpoint, forecasting district needs into the future, continuing to develop and implement initiatives to manage the budget, and also integrating our strategic plan with our budget. So I'll keep iterating these because I think they're key as we frame the budget, put it in context, where we're headed as a fire district, and some of the things that we'll look at as we develop this budget. So I do want to make a few comments on just some of the ways we are managing the budget, and then also a couple comments on our challenges. And again, I'll finish with a couple notes, just context framing it. So I'm hoping the board, will just continue to frame where we're headed. So anyway, in terms of how we manage the budget, of course, we've talked about this, our main sources of revenue, our AV, our EMS transport billing, wildland revenue, and our fee schedule. So really, that's about where all our revenue would come from. We've shared, and we'll share again tonight, just the 4.7% is where the AV ended, what that looks like in terms of revenue increase. And then we've noted that in our EMS transport billing, Department of Health Service allows they recommend an increase annually. Just incidentally, last year it was a couple percent decrease, so we left it where it was. This year, usually it's a couple percent. They recommended 11% increase. So you'll see that structured into the budget, and that's a source of revenue for us. And when it comes to those EMS transport bills, it'll be a source of revenue that increases this year. Again, as we look at the whole economy and what's going on with inflation. And then our wildland revenues, we know we estimate that conservatively, and the reason for that is whether the wildland season is. Although we can look at history and we can have some pretty good predictions, our experts like Chief Coyle, we still don't know what the wildland season holds. Remember in our mission too, if we have to choose between deploying a resource out of district and leaving them in district, if we need it, they stay in district. So there is a priority there. Sometimes we will turn down a deployment out of state or in the region because we're still managing our staffing in the district and want to make sure that's our priority. So that's kind of flexible, and you'll see that, we'll estimate that in a conservative way as we have done the last few years. And then the fee schedule, one of the areas we're looking at working on and improving is a lot of the fee schedules under community risk reduction. you'll see as the budget process moves forward that we're gonna, improve some of those areas and try to right-size those and get them to where, you know, we're covering our costs, which I think, for any public entity, obviously that's something we have to do, you know? And, you'll see that, and then also moving forward in terms of managing the budget, in this process, we're continuing to evaluate each line item to ensure that that division reflects its actual needs. You remember, several years ago when Chief Boyle was acting, that was part of the budget process, was cleaning it so that line item reflects what the need is, not the need plus 10%. So the last several fiscal years, we've worked very diligently to clean that up, and so that's what this budget is gonna represent, is a lean budget that we're doing the best we can to forecast and look what we really need for that line item. And JVG Finance is putting those final numbers together in terms of ask from different managers, and we'll get that whole budget placed together shortly. Another area we always continue to look at is possible grants. We've applied for some grants this last year, and they didn't go through, but we'll always continually look for grant opportunities. And then, another thing that we look at, and this is more under Chief Missoula's purview, is just, you know, how we operate for maximum effectiveness with backfill, with mandatory training, training we can accomplish on duty as opposed to having to take people off the apparatus and backfill. You know, we're in this last month, we did a lot of technical rescue training, and that's intentional because of our mission and the things that we have to do, and that gets so complex that we can't have an engine in service doing that. We pull the people off, we backfill. So we're always looking at better ways to improve that, which helps us manage the budget, manage overtime, manage backfill. So staff, you know, and Chief Cole and their ops is constantly looking at that, how we can improve it. So, also just note that the focus for our staff also is, as you approve that budget, we stay within those lines and that line item. And, you know, we get our monthly reports, as you track that, you'll see that's our effort, you know, and in general, I think we're doing a very good job with that, and of course, you know, we see that as we look at those monthly reports, what that reflects. So, these are kind of general ways that we continue to manage that budget moving forward. So what are our challenges? Challenges are always going to be our increase in CPI, inflation, annual wage and benefit increases, retirement increases, workers' comp. We've seen that number already last week. We'll see that number again. Our various insurance, our commercial insurance, et cetera. So framing that, I think the one thing we have to keep in mind is Sedona isn't in a bubble, right? And obviously, the economy and a lot of those increases are affecting the state, the region, the country. Also, I like to kind of think of this too. You know, I just had a short trip to California, and when I fueled up to come back, I paid $6.29 a gallon. Okay. That's one specific instance that you've all probably personally experienced, watching that gas price hike up. Well, fire district isn't exempt from that. So we have to absorb those costs. We have to project those costs. We have to manage those costs. So I think looking forward, looking at this budget and this year in particular, with the economy and all the inflation and some of the challenges we had, it's going to bleed into the Sedona Fire District. And I know that's no surprise to anyone, but I think moving forward, that helps us frame it as we look at it, thoughtfully look at those numbers. So, one of the challenges again is we want to make sure that we maintain those wage and benefits so that we're competitive in the market. I know we've talked about that quite a bit in the past. We'll talk about that now and in the future. The workforce is interesting here, in terms of the fire service. There's a lot of openings, and there's a lot less applicants, and which is interesting. For me, 30 years in the fire service, I've never seen it like this. I said never, right? I haven't, 30-year period. So this spring, we have a test coming up for firefighter, so we can establish a list and make sure our ranks are filled, which they currently are, which is a good thing. But realize, we have to be very careful how we craft this budget moving forward, that we keep those wages and benefits within market, and it's a attractive package, to be quite frank. You know, all the municipal departments down south in Arizona are all testing, and we're competing with other agencies around us. So we wanna continue to be competitive, because we all know, we wanna get that employee, we wanna train them, we wanna get them through their task books, through their probation, get them promoting up, because we want a 20 to 30-year employee. I want a 30-year employee, they let you retire in 20 years. So I try to twist a couple little arms there at the end, but I think 30 years is a good number for us strategically to say, let's get that person, they're highly qualified, let's get them in our district, let's teach them, train them, let them promote up, and let them become fire chief one day, right? That's my goal. So just framing that, and then the last thing I want to say before I turn it over to Sarah, and she walks us through the rest of the presentation, is just a couple notes I put here, which I think are good, is one thing I think would be good for the board is reflect on the current budget. Notice, like the last several fiscal years, when you look at the different divisions and how it's structured in the different line items, we're not adding divisions, we're not grossly changing how we've structured the budget. So, as we track this year's budget, I think that's a good educational starting point for the board to, you know, be reviewing that, looking at it, because then as we present this year's budget, you can see those challenges, those areas that maybe we needed to fund that we hadn't, you know, that we can highlight as staff. So I think that's a good exercise, and I encourage the board to do that. And also, these monthly reports are important. I know we go through them pretty quickly, and we see the graphs, and it's very, very efficient, but again, those are areas that are structured in our budget. And we're not gonna remove personnel or building maintenance. You're gonna see that year after year after year, because the way the budget's structured, that's an area that we have to fund to keep things moving forward. And then finally, the 10-year projection that we provide, which we really like to do. We know by statute we have to show 2-year projection in our budget. But the Sedona Fire District, as we get our awards for our accounting, one of the practices is that 10-year. So I encourage you to be looking at that too. I think that helps project when we walk down our budget process, but also know that's a reference, right? And I think in general, year to year, it goes up about 5%, which is a projection based on looking back at history. I know that that's just a reference. There's a couple areas I think are challenging this year, like the workers' comp, and we'll talk more about that, it excelled way beyond that projection. And projections are projections. That's not where we have to lie, good or bad. We can get under, we can get over, but it is a great reference, and it helps us look at that 10-year trend. So, those are just some introductory comments, and you know, obviously, if there's always any questions, or if you want Sarah, we'll go through the presentation. If the board has questions, I don't know, Mr. Chair, what you'd like to do?
I think at this point, unless the board has any questions for you based on what you've just presented in your introduction, I think we just move forward with Sarah and her presentation.
Great, okay, so,
Oh, do you have any questions?
Sorry.
yes, go ahead.
We were talking about that the fire district is not in a bubble and it has to pay the same price of gas as everybody else. So we don't have an account within any gas station in particular where we can get a discount through an account because we buy in volume.
Sure, I don't know if you could comment on that, or that's a Sarah question, but we do make an effort, yeah. Oh, Ed, sorry, please, sorry, Chief Mazulis can comment on that.
We do buy bulk diesel. We've got a bulk tank here at Station 1 and one out at Station 3, and we do get some bulk rates, but bulk rates go up too, so there will be an increase. And then with our light fleet, the gasoline engines, we've got a contract with, WEX, thank you. We have a WEX account which supports us some opportunities, but ultimately, you don't get that great of a discount at the end of the day.
Any possibility of discounts Sedona, Verde Valley, so on and so forth, sort of consolidated area group purchasing?
I could check into that. No, I'm not aware. I believe only Cottonwood has a bulk tank. And I know that Verde Valley and Copper Canyon were looking at bulk tanks, but ultimately, it's a company that we contract for bulk fill, so they'd recognize savings potentially, but I don't know. I'd look into it. I don't know if the company would say, hey, collectively you buy 10,000 gallons, then we'll look at a rate decrease. I can check into that. And we have been, last time we looked at eliminating our bulk tanks and going to filling at the speedways, we weren't gonna recognize any savings, so, I'll revisit it.
And I don't wanna get us on a rabbit trail just talking about fuel. What I was trying to give you is a real example that I hope you can relate to, which I personally can relate to, is I'm putting $6.29 a gallon in my car, going, wow, I've never seen that. So, it's not we will look at that, and, you know, we have other savings. I know our credit card program, using that, we get a certain amount. You see the different ads on TV. What we try to do, manage that, if we can, attain that a little back because we're using the same credit card. We do set the programs up like that as best as possible.
Okay, then with that being said, if there aren't any more questions, then let's go ahead towards the JVG presentation.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll turn it over to Sarah from JVG. Sarah, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep. Loud and clear.
Perfect. Are you seeing the fiscal year 2023 budget workshop presentation slide?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's get started. I just want to echo everything that Chief really said. He took a lot of points off the presentation that I'm going to talk through today, so we'll go through those maybe a little bit more quickly and focus on some of the other key areas that we're going through right now. But just today for the budget workshop, we want to give an update on the process and where we're at. We'll talk about our significant budget numbers, an overview of budget projections, the budget schedule, and then any discussion and board direction that the board members may have. Overall, just on the update on process, we have received our first round of budget requests from each of the budget owners. We are going through that process of reviewing those and putting them into the master file, as well as building out our kind of employee look of what our personnel costs look like. We should have that here completed in the next week, that we can then start drilling into each individual budget number and looking at, you know, where we need more, where we might need less, that sort of thing. So that is where we're at right now in the process. I do want to go through some of the significant budget numbers, as Chief mentioned, most of these. Just first on our fire district funding, our sources of revenue, as Chief mentioned, our tax levy revenue, our assessed valuation increased by 4.7%. We do have our non-tax levy revenue, which most of that is related to either ambulance and wildland. Chief mentioned already that we did get that deflator of 11.65% on our ambulance revenue. And then obviously, you know, we're continuing to look at our telecom and communication rents, wildland, and any other types of miscellaneous revenue that we might have, whether that's through prevention and our fee schedule or investment donations, that sort of thing. Really, I want to spend most of our time today talking about our significant budget numbers that we have seen come through. Some of this is new from the last time that Gabe presented last month. Some of it is just repeating. So one of the things obviously that we want to continue to do, the district has done a really good job at, and we want to continue that in this budget cycle, is evaluating that staffing numbers to reduce our overtime usage. We want to make sure that we have a good balance between staffing and overtime. So that's one of the key goals that we have continuing through this budget cycle. We do have a couple of significant increases, as Chief mentioned. We're not in a bubble. We are seeing costs go up across the board on many different aspects. And unfortunately, Sedona Fire District is also in that, seeing that as well. So first off is our PSPRS. We did get an increase of 3.32. ASRS did get a decrease, a minimal decrease, but the total impact of those two things based off of our current payroll numbers is about $265,000. That's without any cost of living increases or anything like that. That's just taking our straight payroll costs that we have today budgeted and factoring in that increase for PSPRS. For Social Security, the COLA that they are seeing right now is a 5.9% cost of living increase. That would increase our personnel expenses to about $900,000. The big one that's come in since I think last time that Gabe presented was our workers' comp projection. It did come in at, or projected right now at 105% increase. The quote that we've received from Securus is $849,000 for next year based off of our preliminary personnel costs. Our health insurance costs are increasing. We have a quote now, I think, from or an estimate of about 4%, which is about $65,000. And then based off of the preliminary roll-ups of the budget request forms from each of the budget owners, we're looking at approximately operational expenses increasing of about $145,000 right now based off of the current requests. Obviously, we're still going through that and refining and developing that, and that'll be our next step as we go through the budget numbers with Chief and the team. Any questions on this slide?
Not so far, not at this point.
Okay, so just kind of reviewing that budget schedule, we will have a budget workshop meeting on April 19th. With that, we will have a full budget look and review with you guys to walk through kind of where we're rolling up. Between now and then, we'll be meeting with the team to refine that budget to bring to you guys next month. Based off of that, we'll get your direction of where we need to go. And then we are looking for tentative adoption on May 17th budget workshop with our final budget hearing and final adoption on June 21st. Any questions or anything that you guys have for us at this point in time? I know there's not a whole lot of detail. We'll be going through that obviously next month, but we just really want to make sure that you guys have the most updated information that we have right now, especially around some of those significant costs of that Sedona is seeing right now to operate from a fire district perspective.
I have a question. With all these increases that everybody's experiencing, including the district, do we have a gut feeling as to what that means in a total increase, or is it something that will reveal itself as further down the line as it gets worse?
Chief, do you want me to?
No, when we get that full draft budget together, then we'll be able to see the bottom line.
Correct.
So we're almost done formulating that. You have anything else on that, Sarah?
No, that's really where we're at right now. Once we see that final roll up, which we should have, or not final roll up, but the preliminary roll up of everything entered, which we should start seeing that come through next week, we'll kind of have an idea of where we're rolling up based off of the original requests. And then we'll be looking at, where we need to go from there.
Thank you.
I have a question in regards to COLA at 5.9 is what we're looking at right now. That's an estimated increase of about $900,000, which is a pretty good chunk of change.
That's
Are
correct.
we looking at any kind of feasibility towards a COLA bank in that it's established at a lower rate? For example, say a 3% max, so that we can maintain some sort of stability in that. And in years like this, where it's a 5.9, the extra 2.9 goes into the bank. So that for years where there's a 1.5 or something less than 3%, that bank makes up the difference up to 3%. So is that something that has been considered or talked about, or even in the realm of possibility?
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, Chief Cole. Yeah.
I just was wondering, from Sarah's perspective, if that's how you treat that money, because you always have to sweep funds at the end of the budget year and put them in the next one. Could that be a capital thing like we do with, I don't know.
Well, I would think that we would have to fund it at 5.9, and create that line item account for that, and then, but only pay out at 3%, so that remains there. So in the budget sense, we're still paying out that 5.9 as far as the people in the community and through their taxes. But we keep that reserve so that when the years are lean, we can make up that difference. And it just kind of spreads it out over long periods of time.
I understand what you're saying. I was just wondering if Sarah could tell us if that's
Oh, okay,
where you put that money
yeah.
and to carry it from year to year.
Yeah, so we could definitely take a look at doing that. I don't believe it's been talked about in the yet, but it is something that we can definitely take a look at. And what we would do is basically restrict those funds from a budget and cash perspective. So they would still show up, obviously, and we could put, a line item on the balance sheet of that bank to be able to draw upon that at a later time. So it's definitely something that we could do and go through that process. I don't believe we've done that yet, but we can definitely take a look at that.
And I would say part of the analysis is looking back and looking at, let's say you can go back a 10-year period and look at what the average COLA is for each year. Conceptually, if it's 2.5% and we ground in, let's do 2.5% every year, even if it says 0 or 1, we do 2.5, it accomplishes the same thing. But I think definitely staff, we can look at that. Are you looking at that?
And it's something obviously through the negotiating with the MOU that we have to discuss that. But
Yeah, we would, with the meet confer, but you are highlighting principle that we do on our budgets is better to have that slow, gradual change in target, other than big spike, and it drops a couple of years, and another big spike. That's hard to control, that kind of a budget. And I know a couple of these numbers spiked this year, but that was way beyond our control. What we have control of, you're right, I think in principle, it's better to get that gradual, target.
the other thing as I look at these significant budget numbers, workers' comp projected at 105% increase. Where does that come from? I mean, was it because of the past 2 years that we've been through, that it's caused it to spike this high, or is it what's causing that we did not foresee 2, 3, 4 years ago?
So a couple factors, and what I missed, I'm gonna let Chief Missoula's comment too, because he's on board for our workers' comp pool, but, and one thing to note, the other workers' comp carrier, there's a risk pool that we're in, and then there's a second workers' comp carrier in the whole state. I haven't seen their number, but they're projected to go up about the same. So, there's very few options for high-risk workers' comp for firefighters. We're in one of two. And there's two big things that I think recently impacted us with that. And one is the cancer legislation, the presumptive cancer legislation that was passed last year, which is good, and I think that's legitimate when you look at the science of medical for firefighters. Although what legislators missed was funding that on the front side, because that's a significant workers' comp claim. So adding that presumptive cancer without funding it, we're gonna have to pick up some of that initially to get a big enough pool. And second to that, we had some significant impact from COVID. And within our risk pool, I believe we had 2 line-of-duty deaths. Those are significant claims. They're legitimate claims and they're significant claims. So in one respect, nobody could have controlled COVID, and part of this increase is the impact of that. The other respect, we passed that legislation, which is good legislation, a program for firefighters, although maybe part of that package was how we're gonna fund it to get it going. So, and I don't know, Chief Missoula, if I missed anything on that.
No, that was an accurate assessment. The 2 COVID line of duty deaths the other one hasn't been calculated yet, but I mean, they're gonna come in at over $5 million. And then the presumptive cancer, that was an unfunded mandate, like the chief mentioned, much less than that, but it's still impactful. And The other insurance carrier, he mentioned 7710, I believe they estimate they're gonna have at least a 90% increase. And it's still not over. This is the worst case scenario for work comp numbers, and we've got a meeting next week, but there are some potential opportunities. They've been working with the legislature, using some of the COVID funding the state has locked up, fire districts to assist with that, and then there's some other options. It's not a done deal yet, but we wanted to release full impact potential so that districts could plan, but that's the worst case number it looks like right now. And then, but ultimately, sorry, Mr. McCarthy, thing with Securus, it is the fire district's pool, so in it, eventually, you know, whatever's invested it doesn't go to investors or shareholders. The shareholders are the fire districts, whereas private companies have similar costs, but there's no recognition of dollars on good years.
I don't want to spin off, but brought to mind unfunded mandates, state.
Yes.
I don't know what the fire districts are doing about it, but it seems to me that mandates should become, if they're gonna make a mandate, they have to be funded front. And efforts towards that, I don't know.
I know that Arizona Fire Districts Association, Arizona Fire Chiefs Association, Professional Firefighters of Arizona, and Securus have all been working together, utilizing the same lobbyists and or the same message to the legislature. And our last legislative report, that there's a lot of hesitation to take a lot of action this year because there's a lot of freshmen coming up for re-election, and then it's also an election year for everybody else. And so they're working every day at the House trying to get things moving. But
And correct me if I'm wrong, but also didn't the current administration in Arizona is the one that privatized what it was before, because it used to be part, we would pay into a government entity, then privatized, and all of a sudden we were high risk, so we went to a different pool, and we were out, and we were looking for other stuff, so they were, in my mind, even worse than unfunded mandate, they created a situation where private profiteering companies were able to push us aside.
Because they want the profit, that's right.
yeah, and it's a mess to say the least. And then there's some other funding mechanisms that municipalities recognized to help offset some of these costs that, for whatever reason, oversight or what have you, they ended up not having the same benefits for the fire districts. So they're trying to iron all that out right now, but a lot of that sits at the state and handshakes and conversations.
Sure, so, no, I wanted to touch on one more thing about the COLAs if we could.
Okay, sure.
So, another thing I just thought would be important for the board to consider if you haven't already, is that 5.9%, that was a point in time, it was, I think, it's third quarter, is what they go off of for Social Security, so third quarter of 21.
Mm-hmm.
By the time this raise, basically it'll be, whatever raise they get, it'll be December, it'll be July, sorry. Over the last 10 years, that hasn't mattered much, because at the most, we've been 2.5%, but we've seen almost 2% inflationary increase in just the last 2 months.
Yes.
So, the more quickly it either goes up or down, which it never does, but the more quickly it goes up, the more impact that people still see, even if we give them a raise that was with Social Security at the time it was implemented. Having 8 to 9 months, it's gonna be a different environment, things are trending right now, so I just wanted to kind of point out.
And I think that's under the challenge category, right? I think across the country, we're seeing some unusual trends right now.
Yeah.
So we gotta manage it.
As it relates to the budget schedule, is it the April meeting that we will receive a copy of the tentative budget for approval at the May meeting, correct? And then at the
So we will
May
see,
meeting,
we will
we're like
see,
1 month behind, I just wanna make sure.
Yes, yes. So the April 19th meeting, you will get a packet at that point in time. We might have board direction from you guys based off of where we're rolling up and how far we were able to get to, that we will need to go back and update that packet for the budgeted tentative adoption on the May 17th, but that is, you will have a packet at that point in time.
Right, so then at the June meeting, we have our hearing, our budget hearing for the proposed budget adoption for July 1, correct?
Correct, correct.
Any other questions? As far as a direction from the board as a result of the budget hearing, I would say continue to press on and moving the direction that you are, trying to squeeze out every penny that we can. You know, as you look at the budget, we realize there are a lot of figures that we have no control over. And there's very few that we do have control over. And when you look at the budget in its totality, that we have control over, it's difficult to make any kind of adjustment that would make an impact to the overall budget. But I just want to make sure that we also take a look at those discretionary funds or contingency funds that, based on history, they are as slim and lean as possible, and still provide that carryover that we need for those first 2 months of July, August, so that we don't get into trouble financially. So, you know, and I'm sure that the staff is well aware of all of that. And as far as the board is concerned, I just want to make sure that we are aware that you guys are looking at every nickel and dime you possibly can. So with that, press on, and we look forward to next month's report.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that carries us from the budget workshop. And I would venture to guess if we want to take about a 5-minute recess before we move into our regular meeting. So let's do that. And Sarah, thank you very much for your presentation. And I'm assuming you'll be doing the presentation for the monthly financials?
I will, yes.
Okay, well, we'll take about a 5-minute break and we'll reconvene in 5 minutes. Thank you. With that, we'll reconvene with the regular business meeting. And Chief, do we have anybody from the public wishing to speak?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Feel silly asking, but you just have to go through the process. Next item on the agenda is our consent agenda for the February 15th, 2022 regular meeting minutes. I move to approve the meeting minutes. Do I have a second?
Yep.
We have a second on that. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? February 15th, 2022 regular meeting minutes have been approved. Our next item on the agenda is our financial report and updates, normally given by Director of Finance Gabe Buldra, but this month will be Sarah from JVG. Sarah, you're on.
Sounds great. Can you guys hear me again?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay. So in your board packet, you will find the financial reports for February 2022. I will go through a couple of key points, and then we will be happy to answer any questions that you guys may have. So the first slide here is our February month results for 2022. You can see our tax levy revenue came in at $294,063. That is slightly under our budget amount. However, when we get to the next slide, you can see that we're actually favorable year to date. So it's really not much of a concern. It's just that timing of how those property taxes are coming in versus how we budgeted, and they historically have come in. For non-tax levy revenue, which is mostly related to like ambulance and that sort of thing, we came in at $195,584, which again is slightly under our budget by about $15,000, and that's predominantly related to those ambulance billings. But again, when we get to our year to date, we will talk through what we look like year to date, which is extremely favorable. Moving into our expenses, our personnel, which is our largest portion of our budget, it actually came in for February at $1,067,725. Again, great job continuing to manage the constraints with their budget and being able to really hone in on our wages and our personnel expenses. We were under budget by about $69,000 for the month of February. And we will continue to see that when you look at our year-to-date numbers as well. Again, with building and land, similar story. We came in at $23,719, which was under budget by about $11,000. That's predominantly related to just some timing of where we had anticipated some building repair and maintenance that are not coming in as high as we anticipated, and some delays in that process. So I don't foresee us we'll continue to see some favorability, but we might see that increase as we begin to close out the budget year. Vehicle equipment and the vehicles and equipment, we came in at $23,963, which is under budget by about $27,887. That is really driven by, we talked about it in our budget meeting, budget workshop. We are seeing some increase in our fuel costs, but we are seeing some offsets and some favorability in our vehicle maintenance costs. So that's really what's driving those two items there. As well as some decreases in our equipment repair and maintenance as well. Communications and IT is also favorable to budget. For the month of February, we came in at $40,436, which was under budget by about $22,000. And then managerial also came in around $68,410, which was also under budget by $18,000. The managerial is really driven by some timing around our legal fees that we had budgeted that we didn't see come in yet, as well as some travel costs have been down just with continuing with COVID and that sort of thing. So that's also rolling up into that managerial number. If you want to move to the next slide, this is our fiscal year to date budget to actual. So this is February year to date. You can see here our revenue numbers. We came in at $14,640,823, which is over budget by $800,000. That is driven by two major categories, actually three major categories. Really, our property tax revenue is up $181,000 to our budget. Our wildland was also up for February year to date around $70,000, and then ambulance also was up about $412,000 from our budget. Total expenses February year to date is at $11,458,811, which is also under budget by $850,000. Again, you can look across the board there on where we're really seeing that big increase, a big favorability to budget, and that's all really related to our personnel costs. Personnel costs came in at $9,730,000, and that's really driven by continuing to manage our wages and our overtime within the district. And then we have favorability across the rest of the categories as well. Moving to the next slide. Our year-to-date expenses as a percentage of budget, we have spent 67% of our budget with a remaining of 33% left to go. If you kind of look at that and annualize where we're at in the budget year compared to what we have left, we're right in line. So no concerns there. Percentage of expenses year to date is a part of the categorical breakout. So personnel right now is rolling up at 85% of our costs year to date. Communications is 5%, operations is about 6%, and managerial costs are about 4%. And then finally, our cash position, again, continuing great story for the district. We have cash right now, as of February year to date, is rolling up about almost $15 million. That really is driven by some of the things we talked about earlier with our year to date results around that increase in ambulance revenue that we've seen, as well as some wildland and then the property tax increases as well. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Do we have any questions from the board? Financial report. And at this time?
No.
Okay. Sarah, we don't have any questions for you. We thank you for your presentation on the financials for the month of February. And with that, I move to approve the financials for the month of February 2022 as stated. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Financial report for February 2022 is approved. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay. Next on our agenda, we have our monthly fire chief's report. Chief Troutwine.
Hey, Mr. Chair, Board, if we look at our 2022 monthly incident summary, call volume a little up in February, but interestingly enough, exact same amount of calls year to date. A little bit of, the call type a little different, but very interesting. What are the odds? But the first 2 months, we're trending right on target. So, wanna put a bet in for next month. We don't do that. This is Sedona Fire District. In terms of our responses by station, you can see, it's pretty much a normal mix. One thing I wanna note, up in the canyon, that, engine may not have as many responses, but just note, and I know the board's aware, we had a firefighter injury up here this last month.
Yes.
Where a car in the snow and ice, slipped around and struck one of our firefighters, who is cleared to come back to work, doing well. So, we're thankful for that, but only reason I highlight that is it takes one call. And again, the reason we spread our stations out across the fire district is so we can have the best possible response time, wherever the emergency is. So, we get some significant calls up in that canyon, and I think our troops do a great job and we're ready. So, we're thankful for that outcome, and hopefully, we won't have something like that happen in the near future. So, continuing with the chief's report, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Administration's Director, Heidi Robinson.
Members of the board, I'll just do a little highlight of our news and events, some upcoming things, and then answer any questions that you might have. I really don't like this microphone. All right, so, the city celebrated International Women's Day, last week. They did invite Sedona Fire District. It conflicted with our captain's testing, so we were unable to attend, but we know that the city went, the chamber, and lots of members of our communities, I'm not certain if any of the members of the board were able to attend that event, but it was a great success and a wonderful, tribute in our community, to women in leadership, here and internationally. And that was a great event that we were happy to try to support, and we just didn't get to make it there. St. Patrick's Day Parade, I'm feeling that was a lovely event that I was not able to attend, and I'm very sad because it's one of my favorites. And I'm glad that it was an event that was brought back to the table again in the community. It is a community favorite, and from the pictures that I saw on Facebook, just from community members, well attended, lots of joy to be had. So things are getting a little bit back to the way we're used to it, where we're going to have actual events in our news and events that we'll be participating in and helping out with. So thank you to Chief Mizoulas for arranging our participation in that event. And thank you to all the board members who did represent Sedona Fire there, and I hope you had a great time. In our news and events, we'll talk about that, and it comes up later. So in Visio, we keep referring to our strategic plan. And the strategic plan software that we use is called Visio. It's hosted through a company. And so our members that are going to be managing this software, it had been the former executive assistant, and so now our new executive assistant is going to be the site admin for that. So we wanted to go through a full 6-week training course, which will have several backup layers. So where we had trained 2 individuals last time, we trained 4. And so all of us are now well-versed in site administration and updates and changing those rules, and changing anything that needs to be done in the listings, reestablishing our relationship with the vendors so they can help us through any protocols. So we want to change any help with the site that we need help with. We completed that last week. We were supposed to have one last training today, but we got through it in 5 weeks instead of 6. So kudos to our excellent students. So now we've established the new update deadlines. We put that into the calendar in that software and are getting it so that people can get their dashboard set up the way they want so they can log in. And then we're going to have a really great view for you to see that we'll be able to log in live in the meeting here to do that. And then we'll also be able to do printouts in your packet as well. So reporting and all of those features. We're all fully trained now. Yes, sir.
When might we be able to kick this off?
Next month.
Okay.
All right, so next month, we're going to be able to log in, but there's nothing for you to see. You can see my dashboard, which you could then see what the features of it look like, but it'll look like a big gray blob of no updates. So April 4th is the next scheduled update for those of us who are owners over areas of the strategic plan. And so that deadline will be for them to log in, go looking through their notes of accomplishments that everyone's been doing kind of manually or up in our heads, as we're known to do, instead of writing it down on paper, which is why we have software. So we'll be getting all of those pieces in through the various people in leadership, and then you'll start to see our little needle tick on where we are in progress. We'll be able to deep dive into some of those strategies and underneath the goals and our action plans and our tasks. So we'll do a little walkthrough for you next month.
Just a quick comment on that. I did have a conversation with the chief during this past month, and he was kind enough to send us the Excel spreadsheet. And I'm looking at it right now, so if the board members did not get that email or haven't opened it up, when you get to that email, the tabs for each goal is across the top. So it opens up on goal 1 if you want to see what goal 2 is, or goal 3, or goal 4, or goal 5, all the way through 9. So you could see you can prime yourself on what's going on, and when the program is available to all of us, we'll be a little bit better informed. So please go ahead and review that when you get a chance, and we'll be good to go.
All right?
Thank you.
So get a different view, but that'll give you all of that material is what's programmed in here, and we'll do a little walkthrough for you next month.
Okay.
So staffing updates on our recruitment. I guess you're kind of well aware we have some IT positions available. Human Resources has been working closely with the IT manager, Bob Moat, with Chief Coyle, and with Chief Troutwine to pull together updated job descriptions, really comparing to industry standards, making sure that what we're looking for is what we're going to get, is what we're going to need. And so that process is progressing. We've gotten our job descriptions validated and getting some good sites to get those posted on. Our goal for those, it's the 3 positions, it's a heavy lift, and they're highly technical positions and very important to the district. But we do hope to accomplish that before the end of the fiscal year, so that we're talking about filling those positions, getting them launched before the turn of our fiscal year. So,
And the 3 are, the 3 positions again?
the 3 titles are, Chief
Public
Coyle,
safety
take it away.
radio technician and then user
Yep.
technician.
Yeah, public safety radio.
Oh. And
That's why I had him say that.
are those under the IT umbrella, or, okay, and then and that was 3, or was that 2?
2 safety radio technician positions.
Okay.
One's been vacant for a and a half, we tried to fill multiple times. And then 1 user support.
And all 3 of those have, well, one of them, they've been occupied at various times, but they've been funded all along.
That's correct.
Okay.
So a user support means support for this one's BO, so, I'll turn it into the future, user support person.
That's correct. It'll be a future Jeremy, and part of what, for the record. Yep. Part of what's taken some time with these job descriptions, it was our intent, actually, we brought before the board before, as soon as we get done with all the executive leadership, we're gonna do a job analysis and then build a job description, position description, and then work on determining whether we needed to do kind of pay analysis afterwards. We only do that job analysis in that way when you have a person in the position, so you can analyze what they're actually doing and use the job description. So since they didn't know those people, or we went outside with some the people that have expertise in this area, went through those job descriptions. But I think the biggest thing is that, you know, found there's some things that we did well. And then when it came to the user support technician, there's a lot of new technology that we have used in the 11 years since we filled the position before, and we intend to use in the future, identify in the job description. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited about where it's going. I think that we employ those with pay, we're competitive. It was a great place to work, and if we can fill those positions, it's gonna be what's necessary to move us forward, with the things we need to do to improve our telecommunications, both within the administrative functions and also.
Okay, super, thank you for clarifying what the spots were.
Also, I had alluded to that we had captain's testing last week, so, that's an internal process, so eligibility is based on completion of textbooks and meeting the minimum requirements for that position. We posted that and give a notice and did our testing process. I'll do a thank you right now to our neighboring agencies. So, a fair number of neighboring agencies provided us their subject matter experts to do that training, so a whole technical drill, 2 sets of oral boards, 2 situational, interview kind of training, scenarios. And so we went through that process. It was 2 intensive days. I think they're glad it's over, and I believe that we do, in fact, have a list today. So, congratulations to those members, as though we notified, how that looks. And if there's any more information, then we'll hear that a little bit later. But good process, a great, thing to participate in, and we're really excited for those opportunities for our internal candidates. Upcoming, we continue to put this on here, and we will continue to do it until we have one, is the planning for the annual award celebration. We did have our committee that was part of the awards committee that selected the recipients of all the awards, are also the ones who will get together and talk about what kind of event we want to have. The way we looked at it before is we want it to be an inclusive, family-friendly, celebration that's, more celebrating all of our employees and our recipients, instead of it just being a formal award ceremony. So we're gearing towards something like that. We want to try to sneak it in, before wildland season really kicks in, and see if we can't get that put together. So we're looking for some time coming up here a little bit later this spring, very, very early summer. And we will keep you posted, and you will be invited. Thank you very much. For that, that's about all of the updates. I'm sure there's other things going on, but they're not so much noteworthy, or they're not really reportable at this time. So we'll just flip right into the mental health moment. And we are right in the middle of Sleep Awareness Week. I don't know if you all knew this, but when I looked up what my piece would be for, March, that happened to fall in here. And so we'll talk about sleep and how that affects our health, not only your physical health, but your mental health. And a lack of sleep or disrupted sleep is one of those big dangers that these, operational folks know all too well. Is not exclusive to operational fact. There's, women of an age also have a lot of sleep disruption, and it is very difficult, when you're trying to align that in a work environment. And so making sure that we are, cognizant of that as an employer and as employees, and working together as management and leaders, that's something to look for, that there are signs of, affected sleep disorders, of sleep deprivation, of sleep disruption that impacts not only our heart health, it affects us physically and mentally. And as I say this, Chief Coyle yawns, I can't even believe it. So, being aware of that and looking for ways that you can help that, so trying to get as much regular sleep, using our quieter tones at night, so we do that so that they're not that jolting tone of alarm in the middle of the night, so there's a more gradual wake up instead of that startling wake up. All of that impacts, and mostly cardiac, and that's something that the studies have shown, we take it seriously, and we want to do everything we can to help. And then those of us in admin too, we have our sleepless nights worrying about all you guys for sure. And that is, it also affects us, so it affects memory and, detailed, figure working, and those are the things, that's our arena, that's what we're working on for you, so making sure that we're on it, get you your right budget numbers, we want to make sure that happens. So look at what you can do to regulate your sleep, to help you get some better sleep, and seek some help. It seems like it's normal, but it isn't. Sleep disorders and sleep disruption are also indications of medical problems, and so ask your physician, don't ignore it. And then it is National Nutrition Month, and we've been talking about that periodically as well, that there's the whole mind-body health experience. So, mind your nutrition, it helps you feel better, right? If we might have gone on a little sugar binge this weekend. A couple of us were traveling and have compared notes of how much sugar we ate, and we can tell. And so you can tell too, when you eat well, you feel better, you think better, you're just an all-around better person, I think. So, stick with it, get some nutritional advice, we're here to help you, get you on a vitamin diet, and it'll be amazing. Something kind of like it. Those are all of my official reports. Please feel free to ask me any questions. I saw Jean first, so I'm gonna go with Mr.
It's not a question, but, thank you, to Heidi Robinson and Chief Mazulis, for posting the, Sheepdog Resiliency Conference that's on Saturday, the 26th of this month. So thank you very much for doing that.
Well, we thank you for bringing that to our attention. That's just another added resource for all of us here in the community and our neighboring community, held over just on the other side of the hill. And thank you for letting us know about that so we could put that information out.
Well, what is it?
Well, Sheepdog, Resiliency, conference is a full-day free conference targeting, veterans, both active and vets, as well as first responders across the spectrum, health, fire, and law enforcement. Again, it's a full-day conference. Several speakers who are nationally known will be there. I'm looking forward to it, this coming Saturday. Thank you.
Al, you had a question?
Well, no, it wasn't a question, just a comment. The Women's International Day, I did attend, and I must admit, I've been to a lot of events in Sedona. It was as impressive a gathering of people in one place at one time I've seen in years. And it'll be next year, March 8th, it'll be the same day, probably at the Hilton, I don't know. You need a big room because it was packed. Mostly women, probably 95% women. The city did have a big table, all 10, seats were, different, staff and women counselors. So you would have had a great time.
I believe I would have. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so, and there's plenty of other women in the district, so keep that in mind. And I had the pleasure of giving our mayor the Lifetime Achievement Award, and that was a lot of fun.
That's excellent. Thank you for that report and that update, and we'll mark our calendars so we don't have a conflict next.
There you go.
Ellen, yes?
I had a question. I noticed in the past, you've talked about a joint event with the police department. That sort of slipped off the table, or?
I just don't want to keep promising things I can't deliver. So it's not off the table, but that is taking some effort to coordinate. And we're going to focus internally for just a moment and make sure that we get our celebration put together. But the two chiefs are definitely still in talks about it, and we'll see if we can't get that aligned as well.
So we've intimidated them, is what you
That's
said.
probably entirely likely.
I think when we brought up cornhole as a competitive thing, they got scared.
There you go.
Keep practicing, I know somebody's practicing, but we'll get something
And
put
bocce
together
ball.
as the first annual.
And bocce ball.
And bocce ball.
Okay.
I think they may see this as a challenge going down, and we look for their response.
Well, thank you for your
Thank you.
presentation, Chief.
Yes. We'll go to operations, Assistant Chief Jason Coyle.
So COVID Hope it's gotten better, hopefully it'll stay better. There's a bunch of stuff out there. I can tell you that one of the things that the country of Ukraine had one of the lowest vaccination rates of any of the countries. All those people that are vaccinated being moved into other populations. That's kind of the thing that I worry about, is how quickly we recycle that. Right now in the US, there's some trends on the East Coast that are starting to pop up a little bit. I'm not gonna, I think opportunities to check things up that we didn't have in the wintertime, is basically. We'll continue to monitor. Wildland season update. The eastern side of Arizona is drier than the areas around Flagstaff. We have had 3 tenths of inch of precipitation from the last couple storms that came through up in the higher country in the brush. So now we're kind of in that position where we had decent snowpack over the winter in the area, talking about the areas from the south through Sonoma. And that snowpack is melting. Soil moistures have come up, so our drought index has gone down, primarily because of the great monsoons we had last year. So it's that time of year where we watch the winds, we look for green up. So as the brush greens up and gets more moisture into it, it becomes less available as fuel. The ground here, primarily, if we have brush, we have junipers. Junipers take a lot of wind on them to get it to move, so those spring storms, or the spring fire, junipers don't tend to burn because junipers are still wet. It's those ones later in the season with the wind on through the junipers that we watch out for. So those are kind of the competing interests. They when the 5-day fuel loading and some other things, but primarily right now we're about average. We're in competition for resources. When our season starts, it's normally things that happen in the southwest region. And then Alaska comes on early. Alaska has record snowfall in multiple areas where they're having to clean the roads because they're approaching that 60 pounds per square foot of snow load. So that's feet of snow. As long as we keep having that competition with Alaska, and even if our fire season does start to come up, I think the deal. It's interesting that they, and I love Climate Policy in the state, so I'll pass this on, not Jason's prediction, but Climate Policy. They said the monsoon should be on time or a little bit early. Okay. I giggle, yeah, same thing, I was laughing when I did. All right, so.
It's like the weatherman.
You heard it here, staff. So going into the GIS, Amy's been working on training operations staff on the new RGIS, and that's not completed, and that new field notes I told you about before, that was the program that they used for the inspections on the field. And she's also working to update the map page books. I got my map page books. I think she's got all of them updated now, and adding lists of all the Forest Service gate codes and some other stuff. This is all gonna be under that one QR code that I told you about, that was QR code. I don't remember which QR code. Those boxes that have all the little black dots in them, and they're not familiar. There it is. Yeah, there you go, QR code. Thank you very much. That was handy. Giant QR code. Yeah. And so we're using this lead tree. She has all the different forms on there that the crews need around the field, from whether it's wilderness intrusion, and we're gonna keep adding to it. So right now we have, when we run an ambulances, there's a form that they use to report that, so we know we have those certain. In a wilderness intrusion is the way that they report that. And it's also where the maps are. So it's just kind of, I don't know, for me, it's kind of cool because we have map books, we have forms and all that kind of stuff, but now that if you want crews to use them without the field right when they need them, you have to put them in their hands in a way that don't use them. Doesn't mean that we're not gonna keep them in paper. The BC doesn't have everything he needs in the old school way to do it. But getting them on all the tablets in the engines and all the phones in the engine, access them to the field and enter the data right there. The compliance goes up. So there were 3 ways to be able to improve it. And Emily's been a huge help with that. She's working on some additional training last month and then finished this month to higher advanced level ESRI stuff. And then I'm not gonna commit to any dates if somebody asks me, but I'm gonna throw this out. She and I and Brian SBO, so Brian takes care of the data side for us over on the firehouse and the regular records management systems. These are come out and pivot tables and pivot tables. So Brian's probably his favorite. Show me. We have Emily that spatially represents that data and has other skills I just described. So, and we've had requests from, from the city, from private entities, from the Forest Service about UTV. So what we're working on right now is developing a dashboard, because we know that the interest in off-road vehicle use, whether it's a UTV or something else, is not going away. We also know that we want to be able to accurately represent the situation, with a minimal amount of bias, where we represent in a way that doesn't allow it to be mischaracterized by people that tend to advocate for one position or another. One of the best ways we can do that is just get that data to say, hey, this is the UTV accidents, these are all motor vehicle accidents. This piece, we have a list of different pieces of information. They come from different data sets, and we haven't quite figured out how to put them all together to get them where we have one report that covers that, but we're working on it. And once that's done, then anybody, we can decide, how to share it. We can either, we can share it with people on request, send a copy of a PDF, we can share the dashboard online. I figured that part out, but the whole intent is to make sure that not only are we being accurate, but we're providing the information in a way that gives context so it's accurately represented. We've had some issues with that in the last month. Take steps so we can to reduce those issues.
Excuse me?
Yes, sir.
Is there feedback to the private industry on this?
Back from the private industry.
To these companies when having with ATVs around and so on and so forth, feedback to them as to frequency and rollover, that sort of thing?
Well, the ones that rent them, I'm sure know when they get wrecked. I mean, that's,
Well, I
I shouldn't say I'm sure, because if somebody wrecked one and then flipped it over, drove back and maybe fixed something. But, we were actually engaged on scene with them. Go ahead.
I know at least one of the companies in town has the technology, when they get a UTV rental back, they download the trip data, can tell max speed, has a gyro sensor, tell if it was rolled over, and then they'll analyze all that. That's part of their closeout before they sign, finish the contract out, because they have the money, they put down whatever, couple thousand on their credit card for eventualities. And so I know one of the companies, I'm sure most of them, or I would assume most of them, have that same technology, because it's simple to install.
There's private industry, there's a working group with the Forest Service about deciding the best way to approach the issue of the UTV, that's increased significantly. And I think they absolutely need to see the table, right, because they're the ones that are out there that are running the machine, their livelihoods tied up in it, and that's a group that I focus on mostly. The individuals that are responsible for getting together and collaborating, including the lady, her name is, sorry, the last 3 nights I've not slept, I had some complex problems I had to deal with, and they have not allowed me to sleep very much, so, apologize for that. The assistant city manager, thank you, Chief, and he's in the group, the representatives from the ATV industry, for Commerce, Forest Service, and everybody agreed to the plan moving forward to gather information and continue. It's gonna take a year to get something where it's actually a tangible plan, so they agreed on process, I guess. And, what's interesting is so this group that has contiguous stakeholder that should be represented that wasn't, and then there's still noise from people that align with the same constituencies. Hey, what about, no, we're gonna stay the course. We have a mission, and our mission is to provide public safety. First, it's to signal that there's anything to do engineering improvements, things like that cause wrecks for any reason on the roads, but they wanna know about those so they can correct them. Trying to make sure that we represent the district's interest in a way that's appropriate for our mission, without getting caught up in somebody else's narrative. And what their agenda is a challenge I would want to do today when I'm. Anyways, we are working on that, and they are involved. Other long answer, I apologize for that. Else before I move on to,
I've got questions, but
okay.
I'll get them all.
I'll kick this one off and then, so, Bob's gonna do a great job wrangling both of the, merit, do additional work for him, and attending the different meetings we need to continue to work forward on the Pegasus project. And acknowledge that is a challenge right now, right? So Bob, he's a one-trick pony out there taking care of all these different things, as far as coordinating the work. He's got people helping with merit, and by all accounts, they're doing a good job. But he's still having to manage that work, and manage the managerial part of his job hasn't gone away. Now that he's lost people, now we have Pegasus, and so kudos to Bob for what he's been doing. One of the main things that he's helped us with is we got there's a discrepancy in the way, I should say discrepancy. We wanted to ensure that we are making sure that our interests are protected whenever there's any changes that are made to any of our equipment because the other people have on them. And so, one of the main things Bob could help us with is make sure that we get third-party engineering to look at these things to make sure that we come back to the table and say, hey, this is what we need done, here's why, and here's how it aligns with what we're supposed to do, expectations. We have that right data, because we don't know. And you can't, it's nothing that any layperson can look at and say, yep, that's what it is. You just need to make sure you do X, Y, Z. And so you need a Bob to be able to talk to the engineers to make sure that stuff moves forward. So, we're working, I asked you not to ask me any names in the meeting, because we're still in the process of negotiating through that, but I want to make the board aware that we are taking every one of those steps, even when they're time consuming, even when it causes a lot of extra work for people, how important it is to cover interest. That is other than that, there's just a lot of other stuff on this list of what Paul's been working on, but that was the thing I wanted to highlight, because it would be easy to push that stuff to the side when you're super busy. And report.
Do you have any questions for Chief Coyle? Okay.
I do actually, just quick, I noticed you skipped over significant incidents, and, other than the one that the chief referred to, I wondered if we.
You know what, I only skipped over because I wasn't gonna talk about the captain's test. And the prep was going around that, I was gonna do that, but I never told them that, so I apologize. But when I look back through the significant incidents for this month, what we see is consistent with what the chief numbers showed, is that we start to see more hideouts, more things like that. And the only other significant event that I was gonna mention, and what the chief mentioned earlier, was the MBA.
Thank you.
I'd say police drug and then Captain's Assessment Center were the two.
Great, thank you.
I've got a couple compliments to give, a couple questions to ask, and I'd like to start out with the COVID. Coming off a year and a half, almost 2 years of this COVID with policies and procedures that we've never had to implement before. Perhaps there was some grumbling amongst membership because we have to do things that we never had to do before. I want to give a big thank you to everybody out there who whether they agreed to them or not, they complied. They did what they were told to do. They did what they had to do in order to get through this. And as we are finding our way out of it, starting to see smiles on people's faces again, and that's a good sign. But it's not over, and at any moment we could dive back into it. But I think as we move on through this, it's just going to be more part of our commonplace. We just have to know that can happen at any time. But to all the members, both civilian and sworn, thank you guys for understanding and muddling our way through this. It wasn't easy. And a lot of this stuff, we just kind of had to wing it as we went along. And we did it. So we're not totally out of the woods yet, but again, a big thank you to everybody out there in this district, the board included, for doing what we had to do, for doing what we were told to do. And, here we are today. So, thank you to everyone on that. I got a question as far as our wildland seasons coming about. And I'd like to know the overall mental health of our membership as it relates to being dispatched out for periods of time away from home. And not only that, but the other side of that is those that are filling to work behind those who are gone. And perhaps even to a point where they are told they have to work a given day, mandatory day or whatever you call it. Are we addressing issues that we've seen in past busy years and providing any kind of change as we move forward? Possibly in recognition of we're getting to that point, we're gonna start holding off. Where are we at in the overall mental health of the whole wildland issue with our staffing here at Sedona Fire District?
I'm gonna try to minimize my own opinion. Based on the first comment you made, you either kind of have one or two choices, right? You can either adapt to a situation, or you can expect the situation to adapt. The ones that were most successful when it comes to mental health through the wildland season and everything else are going to be the same ones that were the most successful in dealing with the COVID situation. Sedona Fire District, there's 3 threats to the Sedona Fire District that are most significant: fire, floods, and storms. Of those, the ones that have the most lasting consequences, the catastrophic wildfire. So, preparing for wildfire, in my mind, having people where they go out and they experience that and they gain the qualifications and ability to make intuitive decisions that are accurate when there's a fire that is threatening Sedona is dependent upon the amount of time that they had, the number of experience they've had in a different suite of situations. So they say that you can't choose an alternative you didn't think of. You want that they have seen a lot of alternatives. That's I think of company. That makes it where it's not a nice to have, it's a have to have. Regarding the mental health, there's a lot of reasons, and I say this with confidence because I asked the captains why they said that people were taking additional shifts and why people would want to work more. So I've been looking at those reasons, we've been looking at opportunities, looking at, I think, every different aspect from the people that demonstrated that with their leadership, whether it did better than others did, and how we can use those examples of the ones that were more resilient leaders to build up some of the ones that maybe demonstrate that resilience, and consistently demonstrate that resilience. And then there's also the issue of a perception of what is a lot when it comes to being mandatory, when it comes to health, and what is an expectation of the position. I can tell you that in a brief assessment that I did, it was 10 hours, I think, on average, 10 hours per year that each individual was mandatory, that were forced to work when they didn't want to work. That's an average, and that, you could, I didn't dig into it any deeper, so there could be somebody that's got, has to be 48 or 60 hours a year, somebody else has 0. But, and now this is my subjective part, about 10 hours isn't much, in my mind. You got mandatory 10 shifts, that's a lot, but that's subjective, right? That's absolutely Jason's metric. And so, what we had done beginning this policy is we reached out to people and say, hey, what's the deal? What's going on? What do we need to do? What are the challenges? What's preventing you from wanting to go out on fire? And we're trying to do it because we need people that have this experience. And we're part of a system that needs us, like everybody else, participate in it. Because we have every expectation that they'll come here. We have our back day. So, I think the best we can do is, and I would love to hear what Chief Mazzoulis has to say about this too, but that we make sure we keep monitoring it and we provide people support. We don't make Jason's metric of what firefighters expected to do, or being gone from home and everything else to standard. That's not fair. It's not right. There's a lot of reasons why that's a bad idea. But we also need to make sure, we also need to make sure that people get the training that they need, and they get the experience they need to make the good decision. Have one opportunity to make that decision. So it's finding that balance.
Chief, do you have any comment on that?
I think there's a whole list of challenges. I've done an informal tailboard survey, and you know, a lot of folks are interested and excited about going out. But we haven't seen it yet in the fire service, the impact of our work world, but, you know, I heard Chief Coyle mention the other day, Goldman Sachs said, okay, game's over, everybody's coming back from remote, half their employees quit, moved on. And that's a strange example, because that's the investment world, but I mean, in public service, Chief Troutwine alluded to, you know, fewer and fewer applicants, things like that. And, they're shifting priorities, you know, and in our two-income households that sit on a fire, you know, we have more people where their wives are, quote, the professional, you know, there's doctors and dentists and nurse practitioners and things, and so the days of chasing 100 hours of overtime a month, aren't as important, and we've got a young population having a bunch of children, and we've got a population that hasn't been able to go see grandma because of COVID for 2 years, and so they're like, holy crap, I can finally go travel again, or it's easier to travel, you know, and so there's a bunch of variables out there, and it's just figuring out the balance is what we need to do, and have realistic expectations, you know, where we may have been able to send out a few single resources and 2 trucks 5 years ago, that might not be reality now, but we don't know, and we haven't had a season without COVID for 2 years, and that changed things too. I mean, sitting in a truck for 14 days with a mask on is horrible. You know, and so, this season, I think, will be a good temperature gauge for us.
There's one more thing I'd like to add. Much of the reasons that Ed just gave about, you know, people that haven't been able to go see their family, haven't been able to go on vacation. But one of the things that we're trying to determine is, like, if collectively the appetite for overtime has gone down, we need to have more rovers, we need to hire more people. We're doing the math right now and see what that looks like. It used to be that we want to keep some of that available, especially if it didn't cost anymore, because people wanted it, we're used to it. If it's a different world, we'll look at what the different alternatives are to meet our needs. And we'll talk about those. So,
Yeah,
I'm not holding my breath and sitting there saying, oh yeah, we got to figure it out with exactly with the system we have right now. We don't. We have to figure out how to get to the calls. The system has to support getting to the calls, whatever the constraints are.
and I blame your generation.
Thank you.
Well, no, because you started a movement in the fire service that extended to my generation, where we, in the firehouse, we started talking about mental health and work-life balance, and your generation kind of started those conversations based on good and bad experiences in your lives, and it's carried through my generation. Now the new generation, we focus so much on that balance and that mental health that people are hearing the message, you know, and they're asking their wife before they hit accept on the overtime shifts. They make sure they have their calendar clear. They're sharing their Google Calendar to make sure they don't, oh, that was so-and-so's performance that night. I forgot, it took a shift, you know, and so people are more cognizant of it.
I'm gonna say that I don't necessarily know that that's all of it either. I have a hard time believing that every challenge that we face is based on someone's good intention.
I agree with you. The feedback from a very large organization, where I came from, what have you, with forced overtime because of the frequency of the fires last fire season, coupled with COVID and on and on and on. We talk about the mental health of the people within the organization, but the mental health of the family that's left behind. We don't often recognize it, and I don't know, I don't have any answers. But the fact is that young families, often with children and so on and so forth. So just the mere fact that we in the fire service recognize the stressors, not only to our personnel, but to the family members, children, wives, and so on and so forth.
Well, obviously, I opened up an issue that is worthy of a lengthy discussion on this. But it's important that every member of this district, is aware that, knows that this board, from the very top all the way down to the very bottom, we're aware of that sort of thing, and we don't want to forget that. Heidi, with your presentations, you always discuss mental health. So we think about that, and sometimes we have to address it. And we may save this for a discussion later on, but it is one that I'm sure will happen. So, thank you for your input on that. As it relates to GIS, Heidi, you showed a OES or
QR.
Post that up again. Okay, I bring this next topic up because that symbol, when you scan it with your phone, brings up a whole bunch of information, whatever's programmed into that. When the district installed the 9/11 memorial, that sort of thing was asked to put in a corner somewhere so that when a visitor came up to it, they can scan that and see the history of how this whole thing came about as far as our 9/11 memorial. Again, it's something that I'll discuss with the chief later on, but I didn't know we had the capacity to create that in-house. So now that we do, I'll bring that up with you. The ATVs and the accident accountability as it relates, I know local city government has questioned, where do we get the information? Where do we get how many crashes we've had, how many injuries, how many rollovers? And we never kept that. Or if we did, it was not so specific that it would help them. But I think we're now getting to a point where we can create that information so that it can be helpful to other organizations, perhaps law enforcement, perhaps, forest to create better roads, or whatever the situation may be. This is something that we're going to be able to do.
We have the aggregate information, we've always had the aggregate information, we just didn't have the information. It's still down to where the national,
Service.
NFIRS says it's supposed to be down to that granular level, so we have since created a subset of motor vehicle accident with motor vehicle accident that is specific for UTV. So we've always collected the data, it just wasn't as granular as they wanted it to be. We collected data on motor vehicle accidents. But also, on that topic, a criticism of Yavapai County recently because they didn't have the same numbers that we do. Well, Yavapai County responds to a motor vehicle accident. If it's on a public road, it's treated as an accident. If somebody is off on a UTV on a trail, or they're off four-wheeling and they flip it over, it's like wrecking your mountain bike. It doesn't get a police report, it doesn't get anything else, it's just, your fancier mountain bike. So, with a motor. Yeah, so, I think that is the important part too, is we put this data out there, so we make sure that, hey, this is what we count. This is what doesn't count for Yavapai County. It doesn't mean that there's something nefarious, or that they've done a poor job, or that we're inflating numbers. It just means that we gather the information for two different reasons. And we cover by different statutes. So, it just makes me grin, because there have been a couple times recently where people have started with the end in mind, and then they've tried to make the information fit that. And,
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
I'm quite aware of how controversial this whole UTV, in the organization, and who's involved in the data, and I want to applaud you for taking the high road of being analytical, fact-based, unemotional, neutral, because that'll, in the long run, that'll come back with major benefit. I kind of see that what's going on over on the other side, where everybody's ready to fight, and you're not. You're just going to give them the facts.
yeah, I guarantee nobody on, that run these companies, they didn't wake up in the morning seeing how they could wreck the place. So, there's still consequence that we need to mitigate, 100%. But I just have a hard time, and maybe because I've been able to humanize myself with them, because we've been doing meetings together and everything else, because I think that anybody else, whether you're working on, if you live on a ranch out there, or you're the person that was working on had a business plan that included it'll do this, and you're glad that you sunk a lot of money into it, you're trying to make it work. Everybody's, in those groups, for the most part, has come to the table. It's just, it's that satellite, that orbit of different opinions around there and different policymakers around there that seem to be where the disconnect happens. Thank you for that. It's a great reminder of us. David Forrest.
That's it. That's all I had. Chief, back at you.
Thank you, sir. So, our Community Risk Reduction Division Chief, Booth, she's out training this week, so I'm gonna take her CRR report, which I gladly do with pleasure. You can see we had, 4 code consultations, and we do, I know you're all aware, there's a couple of code issues that we're walking down, which is interesting. Some of the input from the counties and attorneys is, oh, we've never had to do this before, we've never seen that before. So, I don't know, that's the history of my life, but, well, we're gonna walk those down to ground, and hopefully it'll improve our district, but also improve the districts across the state with some of the conclusions we'll get to. You can see we did quite a few inspections, 97, for this last period, and both inspectors and our administrative and specialists and fire marshal worked very hard on those inspections, do a really good job getting those fire code requirements applied out there in the field. We had 33 plan reviews, also 4 fire-wise home assessments, which I want to applaud. That's excellent. We all know that that's an excellent program for you to put up your house and your property, and this is the time of year to do it, really, right? March, April, May, so you're good to go through our wildland season here locally in the Southwest. Couple fire investigations. We had, in terms of our compliance engine, 67 system reports, which is very good. And we're utilizing that to best advantage, and that report's out to confirm that that fire protection system or sprinkler system worked properly. And then if we do have an anomaly, we can follow up with our inspectors and make sure that gets corrected. So good work there, keeping our community safe. A couple of notable events. Our Inspector Rydell attended NFPA Wildfire Prevention and Home Safety class. Also, Chief Booth attended Session 1 of our Arizona Fire Chiefs Association inaugural Chief Executive Officer program, and I know our own board chair was a guest speaker in the panel there, and my understanding that was a 1-week course, and the second week of that is in October. And I heard from different chiefs just very good input from that course that week, and so I'm excited to hear from Chief Booth how week 2 goes in October, and it's first year, so I know AFCA will evaluate its effectiveness and improve it, and I imagine it's gonna stay. It's great training for that executive level officer. Our fire marshal safety message revolves around our firewise, so immediate zone. And, you know, as we prep our properties and homes, the key is getting that grass away from that structure, living up your trees, and removing fuel from around your house. And I think, just keep in mind, we will, when you call the Sedona Fire District and ask for a firewise inspection, we'll send one of our inspectors out. They'll do a thorough inspection and give them a report. Also, I'm excited about this season. The U.S. Forest Service has staffed up in our area, and they're working with us and very available, and they want to participate in those inspections. And they have some experts who do the same work as our inspectors, and they just bring another dimension, and they have a crew resource management, fuel mitigation crew that they'll be putting in service here in the valley this year. And again, we've reached out to the Forest Service, especially when we come up on our fuel mitigation program up in Oak Creek Canyon. We're gonna try to get them to participate with us also, and just see how when the Forest Service staffs up here in the area, not only that crew will be in place, but they also are putting in a fire prevention battalion chief, which is another staffed up new position here for the valley. Again, why? What is it about? Well, it's all the preventative component, all the mitigative component. We're trying to get ahead of that, look at our trouble areas, and have enough staff to get in there and assist. So we're gonna align with them. We're gonna see how they can assist us here at our fire district. Under the CRR, just so you know, there's some a new evolution in the Forest Service about they call a fire shed, correct? Is that the correct terminology? So, what's a fire shed? Well, a shed, it's an area where fire is a high risk. Well, it just so happens in our fire district, we have a fire shed. Can you guess where it is? I'm not talking about Chairman Soto's outbuilding out in his house, I'm talking about actual forest area. Does anyone have an idea?
Can't.
Guess?
Can't.
All right, good, I know Chief Cole and Chief Mazulis know, and Heidi probably knows too. And Kim, I don't know, Kim, can I talk about fire sheds? So it is, from uptown up through Oak Creek Canyon. That is recognized by the Forest Service as a fire shed. So when we share with them our mitigated efforts up there, getting those dumpsters, getting everyone to have that opportunity, they're very interested in helping us in any way they can. So I'm hoping we can hook that fuel mitigation crew and put them to work in areas up there as needed and in a way that they can in their area. So more to come on that, but, you know, the community risk reduction efforts by the Forest Service this season, I think, are gonna be significant, and I think obviously by our staff, our division, and our firefighters, this is what it's all about, right? Getting ahead of that fire shed, doing fire-wise inspections, keeping our fire code applied, getting ahead of our code enforcement issues, and it's the best way, I think, long-term to really make your community more safe. Yeah, if you ask me, I want 5 more fire stations and 25 more firefighters on duty. I can configure this district in a way that you would probably fire me for a budget increase. It would be fun for a moment, but the point is, I think sometimes, you know, we wanna go heavier on the response. We have to. Emergencies happen, we have to mitigate those. But we also wanna go heavy on the mitigated side, so, and unfortunately, to the natural eye, to the layperson, you don't really see a lot of that mitigative efforts. You just know, why is there not a lot of fires up at Oak Creek Canyon? Because we've been doing some mitigative efforts and getting ahead of it. So that's something that we always want to try to quantify and qualify, although it's challenging, but we're going to keep at it. You can see all the busy activity there, busy division. That would conclude the report for CRR. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
Not a question, just, I read about the, ADOT, work up in the canyon that will, restrict traffic. I don't know what the hours are and so on, but, and I'm sure the district has anticipated, the effect on a response in that area and working with ADOT, and, agencies north of us, to handle, because I believe it's some of the switchbacks, and, with rock slides are the concern.
And yes, sir, that's correct, and then also the bridge that goes across.
Midley, yes.
Yep. Resurfaced. And so, you know, I'd say, I think it's been at least 6 months, maybe a year, since they first came to us with the information about the programs, and invited us up to attend multiple meetings along with all the other public safety agencies. And their preference was to be able to more expediently take care of the work, was to close the road and do the whole thing. Unfortunately, you know, we had to be able to get through. And so they worked with us. It's gonna extend the length of the project, but all the public safety agencies were service for a while, and the risk and everything, that we couldn't have people going up the canyon to turn around and come back down. So, as someone that drives that road, I too, it's gonna be a mess. They've been very responsive. Calling us early, and literally before they had planned. Our concerns and use those in a formulation of the plan.
The reason why it's a fire shed, right, by definition. And a big box canyon, that has heavy fuel, at least from a firefighter perspective, and if there's one road in and out, it's narrow. And then we'll do construction too, so,
Yes.
but we do appreciate that coordination, it has to be done, right? We need to improve the environment, that's the mitigation. Other questions for CRR?
Oh, sure, thank you.
Outstanding, thank you, Chief Booth. And then, let's go to Division Chief Ed Mazulis for operational support.
Who?
What happened?
Few words.
I know, it's,
There's too much stuff.
I'm not gonna read each of the numbers, it's training season, it's always training season, but spring is our heavy training season. Our crews completed their PAC tests and their wildland refresher, last month, and coming into this month. PAC test is on flat ground, you do a 3-mile hike with a 45-pound pack in under 45 minutes, and you can't run, you must walk, so it's pretty ridiculous. But, they've completed that, and a bunch of our paramedics, went through their refresher training last month. This is also recertification season. Our medics have to recertify every 2 years. And, there's a bunch of core competency hours that are required for them to take in different disciplines. And so that, a lot of our guys are completing that process. Busy with training, the CAPS test is a heavy lift, takes a lot of resources. And, we fill every hole in the station with an assessment piece of the test. And so there was just people everywhere. And so it's been real busy with training. And then, Heidi mentioned some of the administrative trainings that are going on. And then, Mike Sheehan, our mechanic, he's got the series of the EVT, Emergency Vehicle Technician courses. And, they changed some of the credentialing pieces last couple of years. And with COVID, he's had a difficulty adding some of the ASE certifications, which are automotive service, something. I'm blanking now too. But either way, he just, he finds these, a lot of them are offered flag, he finds them and then he gets them done. He just completed last month his, vehicle, electrical, and steering and suspension stuff. So he's keeping his education up and keeping in the loop on the latest trends to keep our fleet safe. Speaking of fleet, I wanted to give you an update on the 2 vehicles you approved in November, which is a technical rescue truck and a command vehicle replacement. Their progress. So, moving on to EMS activities. No, I joke, but per the chief's request, I want to anchor into the fleet stuff, just to express to you guys some of the frustrations. So we ordered 2 Ford chassis. One of them is going to be a command vehicle replacement. We did a lease option on that because it's a pretty milquetoast order, a very basic truck. It was delivered to the company that does the lights and the upfit in January, and got a camper shell on it, and I checked on it last week, and they're still waiting on lights, because every little blinky light has a microprocessor or a chip. So they anticipate we may get the light order in at the end of this month, and then we can get started. So, but it's ready to get upfitted, it's just, there's no parts.
They're still all over in Taiwan.
Yeah, and then the technical rescue truck, so we're replacing the bed of that vehicle to be able to hold our rope and swiftwater rescue gear. That equipment is starting to show up, but Ford can't tell me when the chassis is gonna go into the queue. So it doesn't exist yet, it's parts on a storeroom floor. And, then we have a committee working on finalizing a proposal for Type 1 engines, the big main fire trucks, and, we're getting estimates of 18 to 24 months on build times on those right now. So it's not boo-hoo, but it's frustrating because you have these plans laid out, and, who would have thought it'd take 8 months to get a Ford truck built, And, so we're doing the best we can, and manufacturers are doing a really good job of keeping us in the loop, but again, the radios for the command vehicle, they're mobile radios, commercially available. We don't do anything special. We ordered them November 22nd, and the company still cannot advise us of a potential ship date. So for those of you that are newer to the board, pre-COVID, had you approved a November purchase of an apparatus, it would be in service by January, and, without issue. So these are new times, and we're navigating them and figuring out the best practice, and it's industry-wide. It's not unique to us because we're in a rural community. It's just, all the pieces and parts that go into vehicles, it's what it is. And, EMS activities and updates. Again, we just continue to do a lot of training. Got a little bit of an increase to interfacilities, and I'm monitoring that. We made some changes to our transport protocols per NAH's request, and we're evaluating how those changes are gonna impact our service delivery. But other than that, EMS supplies, haven't seen any impacts to getting supplies for EMS. There's more of a delay in the orders now, but those are coming in, you know, all the PPE and all the important stuff we use for EMS seems like the supply chains for that stuff has really not been an issue right now. So that's the gist of my report, if there aren't any questions.
Chief, could you elaborate a little bit on the fact that we had a call that required CPR while in flight being transported, and they did something that they'd never done before, but this incident caused us to do something outside?
Yeah, so in December, we were dispatched to staged for the police who were responding to a victim that was shot multiple times. On arrival, our crews initiated trauma care, and patient coded or, you know, lost his heart rate and our heartbeat, and so they put him on the auto pulse device that we have, and got return of circulation, and that's difficult when you're bleeding out, and so they were making good progress. However, they needed to go to a trauma center, and ground time would be extensive. Flight obviously was the best choice, and to that point, Guardian Air had never flown with the auto pulse active. Typically, they don't do CPR in the aircraft for a whole bunch of reasons. There's two people, there's tight spaces, they can't be safely buckled, and so forth. And forward-thinking medic and nurse on that flight said, yeah, let's do it. And so they did it, and then that caused some conversations between Guardian Air and Sonoma Fire, and they've now changed their policies and procedures because of that event. And so it's a pretty cool deal. I mean, that same scenario could play out with a cardiac arrest survivor or a whole bunch of other calls, but the fact that they had the forward thinking to give it a try, I think it's pretty cool.
Now, to return, the device, does Guardian Air do that, or do we have to go back up and pick it up with the flag staff?
You know, I really haven't established a policy for that, because what I anticipate to be the infrequency, and to be honest, if that flight happened again, I just grab one of our firefighters or Chief Coyle or I and say, hey, would you mind swinging by Guardian? They're right at the airport and grabbing the device. So I wouldn't imagine it would be a huge issue. And worst case scenario, you know, the duty chief could detail a guy up on a pickup to grab it if it was needed immediately. Yeah, we have another one in the next 5 years where that occurs. I'd be great, because it might be good patient outcome, but I don't think it's gonna be a frequent event.
Thank you. Chief?
I-
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question for you, sort of, my question goes back a little bit in history. You mentioned needing to go to a trauma center, so I'm assuming now we go to Flagstaff or Phoenix or wherever's required. Have you seen an impact on us from the loss of the trauma center designation at the medical center here in Sedona?
Yeah, we haven't recognized any impacts to our service delivery with them losing their trauma designation. I can go into great detail offline with you if you'd like.
No, I'm just curious if we've seen an impact.
Can I circle back to the auto pulse
Yes.
quickly? So, last fiscal year that we got approved from the board to purchase 2 more, and I believe we have 3 in service now, is that correct?
Correct.
And they're stationed at?
1, 4, and 3.
Okay, so initially we had 1 auto pulse, which the duty chief carried, and would respond on all need for that. Now that we've spread them out, we've increased the service. And not only that, you can see an outcome here, that we were able to put one on that aircraft, and the gentleman's alive, which for all intents and purposes, he should not have. So, hey, it's a testament to that crew, to our paramedicine, to our innovation, you know, to how we think. We want to maintain not only status quo, well, we wanna see how we can be innovative and improve. So, that's an awesome highlight, and just so the community knows and the board knows, we appreciate the support, so we can multiply and get 3 units out there, so they're quicker to patient side. And that's a big deal in our district.
Thank you, Chief.
Back to me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hey, and one more thing, I think Chief Cole told me that HR did post a certified list for our captain process. Is that correct? So, we had 3 successful candidates. They're on the certified list, ready for hire, ready to sit in the seat. Michael Page, Jonathan Scaife, Greg Everline, in that order. So, when a badge comes up downstream, you'll see them promoted in that order. Hey, the whole group did a fantastic job, and, it was an excellent process. So we're standing by. No openings yet for them, but great candidates, great staff work, and just really good process. So I wanted to, you guys heard it from the horse's mouth. Okay, I'll be the horse. So, thank you. And, so to finish off the chief's report, I think we already did our update on the strategic plan. Heidi did an outstanding job. Thank you for that. And, staging for constructions, I have no updates tonight, although we'll work on a harder timeline, so you can kind of see that as we move forward with the different phases. And then you can see we didn't have any purchase orders between 10,000 and 50,000. You can see our public outreach and communication in terms of our social media. Interesting, the interest and engagement there with the ATV versus vehicle. That was a significant interest over here, and with some significant injuries that our crews worked. Of course, the traumatic fall and rescue, and then the film festival traffic. Interesting, huh? So I think traffic, if we put traffic in any of our social media posts, we're always gonna get all kinds of hits. I think, people Google traffic and see, that gives them some new route to the promised land, right? So, and then finally, a couple great thank you letters. I hope the board read them. Just really nice to see our crews thanked and highlighted for their service and their great work out there. Did not have any donations. Close the chief report. I would like to say thank you to the board. I know the positions you serve are volunteer, obviously elected, but your work is noted. And on behalf of the fire district, thank you, all of you, for your work, and your hard work and your support. You've always been, at least under my tenure, incredibly supportive to myself, to the employees. Making advances like free auto pulse from one. There was no hesitation by the board. And again, I think it's a testament to staff outlining our needs too. And then second, I would like to thank staff. I gotta admit, and, Chief Booth wasn't here. My executives that sit through the board meetings and report out, they're very intelligent people. And I find myself just, learning every board meeting. I'm like, wow, these guys are great. And then it's like, Chief, back to you. And I'm like, what? Oh, it's me? So, thanks to both division chiefs and Chief Coyle and Heidi, and obviously all the other administrative staff and all the other employees here. I think, I'm just, very thankful to the board for their support for this fire district. I'm thankful to the staff, the leadership, and I think we're hitting it out of the park. Yes, we have our challenges. Yes, we always have areas to improve, but I think we are hitting it out of the park, which means swinging the bat hard, and we're looking for some significant contact. We want to drive the ball as deep as we can. Just because baseball signed, they're back in. I'm thinking about spring training. So, we have staff that's doing a fantastic job. We continue to try to highlight that. But, and this district doesn't happen without this board, without this staff, without the hard work of really 99 employees. So, I'm looking forward to subsequent months as we move forward, but I wanted to pause at the end, you know, and for question and comments too, but just a shout out to the board, to the employees. And again, you know, it's not all fastballs that were hit either, even though we would desire that. COVID was more like sinkers, sliders, drop balls, stuff that you don't normally see, right? Junk balls. But we're still making contact and hitting it out there in the field and around in the bases and scoring touchdowns. So anyway, thank you. If there's any questions or comments on the chief report.
Any questions for the chief? Thank you. I like that analogy with playing ball. Lastly on our agenda is our board member items. Discussion of board members' fire district related activities since the last board meeting. And I will start, ladies always go first, so I'll start on the far left with Helen.
Well, normally I'm feeling very embarrassed at this segment, but this has been a busy month. And other than coming in to sign the payroll check, which I'm sure everybody appreciated. No, participating in the St. Patrick's Day Parade was wonderful, and Chief Mazzillo, thank you for your prep, and for guys on both the engine and Josh on the ATV. Right. So that, and had the opportunity to have a conversation with Dave on board business and a one-on-one with the chief. So it's been a very good fire district month for me.
Thank you. Janet?
I have a one-on-one with Chief tomorrow. And, I also participated in the parade, and it was lots of fun, and truthfully, ours was the best.
Gene?
Well, I'm back from my extensive travels, so I'll have to make an appointment with you, Chief. And, so until then.
Al, what do you got for us?
I got to sign some checks, so that's, signing a check that big is just really, like, fun. I really had fun with the parade, that was, and I wasn't through my candy, but I never, did that on purpose. No.
Okay.
But in any event, and the chief and I got together, I think it was this past month, but altogether, I'm, so honored just to be part of this board and this fire district.
Well, lastly, I too was able to participate in the St. Patrick's Day Parade and had a good time. It was fun to see the community out there and back into the swing of things. I think it was a 2-year absence, so it was good to be back. And again, thanks to the crew for hauling us out there. This past month, I had an opportunity to talk to the chief a little bit in how we can make our board operate a little bit more efficiently and effectively. And not so much primarily to work within within our own organization as far as a board to find out more information. I guess that's vague, but what I'm saying is the community hears us say we had our one-on-one with the chief. We had our one-on-one with the chief. But what does that mean? And how do we benefit from that? And so I asked the chief, how can we get information, feedback from you based on what was said that maybe we have the same concerns? Because we have no idea what the other member discussed. And it's not that we wanted to know every little thing that somebody else said, but if there's a common thread of the conversation that several of us discussed, perhaps that should come back to us as a whole so we can move forward on that, perhaps as an agendized item to discuss at a board open meeting. So through that discussion, it came about that, the board does definitely want to participate more in the district functions, i.e. St. Patty's Day Parade was one. Today, we had a badge pinning of 2 new engineers in the district, and I was able to attend, albeit but a minute late because of traffic. But it was good to see promotional, badge pinning being done. But it was also good to see the expression on the members' face when they see us come aboard and that, hey, they're here, they care. Well, we do care. And so we're gonna be doing more of that, and it won't just always be me. It'll be all of us. I just happen to be first up. And it may be the captain's test coming up for the next captain who to be pinned. But, so, you know, we talked quite a bit about that sort of thing, and, you will see more information being tossed back and forth amongst us through the chief, because obviously we are bound by certain rules that we can't talk, you know, beyond 3 people, or 3 people or more. So, that was quite helpful for us, and for me, personally, and I'm looking forward to moving forward with all that exchange of information for all of us. So with that said, that concludes everything that I had to say, and I'd like to thank the district, your staff, admin, the field personnel, and everything they do. So, till next month, this meeting is adjourned. All right.